First of all, I want to welcome all of you to our Hazak program today. I know that we are all in for a very, very big treat. Now, I want to tell you just a little bit about our wonderful speaker, Dr. Gerald Blumenthal, right here. It is a lot to be said about him. He is a mechanical engineer, industrial psychologist, 6 times author and businessman, who will be discussing his latest book, which is right here.
Thank you.
So here is the book. It is called Serial Killers, Their Lives, Their Crimes, Their Handwriting. So the book deals with the lives, the crimes, and the handwriting of 34 notorious serial killers and how some of them have been captured because of something they wrote. Gerald, his wife, and 3 daughters immigrated to the United States from South Africa some 40 years ago, something he regards as the second best decision he ever made. So you wonder, what is the first best decision? Marrying Stella was his best decision. And they just celebrated their 54th wedding anniversary, which is wonderful. Please join me in giving a very warm welcome to Dr. Gerald Blumenthal.
Thank you, Cuban Betty. Getting down to business. It's been estimated that there are over 2,000 active serial killers in the United States. Some of them, because of their ability to merge themselves into society, are often not caught for a long time. If we take somebody like Ted Bundy, he murdered up to 100 women, but because of his good looks, his charm, and his intelligence, he avoided capture for a long time. Then you have somebody like the Zodiac Killer, who's never ever been caught. So, what are the chances that there's a serial killer living in your neighborhood? In fact, I would like each one of you to shake hands with the person next to you. Would you do that for me? Statistically, you could be shaking hands with a serial killer.
I'm not got a lot of possibilities.
This is a photograph taken of one of the worst serial killers, John Wayne Gacy, holding hands with First Lady Rosalind Carter at a Democratic convention. Just shows you how people can immerse themselves. Graphology, is it real? There's a lot of negative comments made about handwriting analysis, and I want to make it quite clear that I'm not a handwriting expert. All I've done is looked at the handwriting of 34 serial killers and looked for things that are common to all of them. You may recognize this gentleman. This is really a joke, so you're free to laugh if you want to. Julian Assange said graphology is a pseudoscience. Now, with all that in mind, can you imagine that one day I got a call from the Italian Women's Club of Houston asking me to give a 2-day seminar at their building. And I'd hardly started speaking when a lady stood up and she said, "I think this is a lot of BS." Now, I'm a very sensitive person, but I kept my cool and I said, "Why do you say that? Why do you think handwriting is impossible to analyze?" She said, "Well, I think what you do is you look at the person and you make a judgment about their physical appearance, and then you decide on their personality, nothing to do with their handwriting." So I said, "Well, then why don't we do a little experiment? Tomorrow night, bring me the handwriting of somebody that I don't know, somebody that you know, and put it in a sealed envelope, and I will analyze them." She said, "Fair enough." The next night, she presented this envelope to me, and I opened it and I studied the handwriting, and I said, "This was written by an 18-year-old girl. Her name is Jeannie. She has green eyes and red hair. This lady almost fell off the stage. But you see, what I didn't tell her was that the sample said, "Hi, my name is Jeannie." Can you blame me for feeling like this afterwards? And I never ever told her that that was in the record. Okay, getting down to serious stuff. There are 8,000 US companies and 70% of French companies and a lot of Israeli companies using handwriting as a pre-employment test. And here are some pertinent facts. Handwriting is not, you cannot separate because it's male or female. You cannot see whether it's left-handed or right-handed. You cannot tell the handwritings of somebody younger than 16 and over 65. And there are a lot of reasons for that, which I'll go into a bit later. And of course, the handwriting must be cursive. A lot of the kids today do not write cursive, so it's very difficult to analyze them. Fortunately, most serial killers are over 16. Now, this is your opportunity to prove to me that actually Brit Shalom members are very, very smart. Who would you say is more moody, A or B? A is correct. Who is more confident, A or B?
B.
That's Neil Armstrong, by the way. Who's more optimistic?
A.
A. That's John Kennedy, by the way. And the bottom one was a serial killer. Who's more depressed?
Second A.
I just wanted to make sure you're watching, that's all. Actually, the bottom A is the one, that happens to be Adolf Hitler. Who's more introverted? A or B? B. B is correct. Who's more, has more ego? That's Barack Obama. Who's more affected by past experiences?
Michael Jackson.
Correct. Who's more ostentatious? Liberace, right. Who's more dishonest? That's a difficult one because you haven't been told anything. It has to be Amanda Knox. If you look at the this part here about the see the O there with the four loops in it, that's dishonesty. Who's sharper? Who's more sharp, more analytical? B. Guess who that is? You want to know who that is?
Donald
It's
Trump.
Donald Trump. Now, simple things that can solve crimes. Ever heard of Robert Durst? He's one of the tribe. Did you know that? Yeah, he actually was abandoned by his family in New York. They gave him $100 million and said, go away. But he ended up decapitating somebody in Galveston. I don't know if you remember that. And he actually got off because he had the dream team. But this young man, he's actually younger than me, they also thought he murdered his first wife. And then his girlfriend, Susan Berman. And how did they know who was the murderer? And that trial is coming up in September. Do you see the letter written by an anonymous person telling the police where they could find her body? Do you notice how he spelled Beverly? E-Y. And here's a letter that he wrote to Susan. He spelled it wrong again. So, and this guy apparently was extremely smart, but not that smart. Now this is something that you should look for in the person next to you. Somebody who does this. It's called the felon's claw. Here's a classic example of somebody caught because of his handwriting. In 1989, the bodies of 3 women surfaced in Tampa Bay. At first they didn't know who they were, but eventually they did identify them, and they put a billboard in Tampa looking for the killer. Nothing happened. Nobody could identify them after this. Then they found the car that the family had used to drive to the marina, and in the car they found a note, and they are absolutely sure the note wasn't written by any of the women because they analyzed their handwriting. And this is what the note said. You see on the right hand side of the white circle, there's the felon's claw. And on the top he did something very unusual. He capitalized the letters in the middle of a sentence or a word. That's a capital one there, mixing capitals. After 2 years, the case went cold, but a bright young detective said, why don't we put a sample of the handwriting on billboards around Tampa Bay? And that's exactly what they did. So they put this billboard up, and it didn't take long. They got a call from a little old lady, not the same one who met me in the front, and she said, I've got a receipt from somebody named Ober Chandler. That was the receipt she got. Notice how he did the capital T's there again. Ober Chandler, of course, denied that he killed one, but he had a previous history as well. And when he was executed, in his last statement, you see, he did the same T's again. Of course, it took 22 years to execute him. July the 22nd, 1957, 2 policemen were killed by an unknown gunman. And the only clue they had was a fingerprint on the car they had stolen. And in those days, they never had the sophistication of today, so they didn't know who the handwriting belonged to. But about 3 months later, they found the actual murder weapon. And that murder weapon was traced to a George Wilson, who signed up at Sears Freeport, living at the YMCA. But they checked it out, there was nobody by that name. So for 47 years, or 45 years, they identified the handwriting using APHIS. That's the new technique. And it was interesting because his handwriting, when he was George Mason and George the other Mason, were identical. The G's were identical, and he actually was sentenced to 2 life terms on the basis of that. Remember this one? That's the felon's claw again. You see that felon's claw? How about these 2 gentlemen? I use that term loosely. Jerry Stello, 43. Gary Ridgway, 71. All had the felon's claw.
Did they subconsciously do that, or is that kind of a little,
We don't know.
communication between them?
We just don't know. Jeffrey Dahmer. Very sweet young man. You see the felon's claw again? His handwriting. This was the most prolific killer of all time. Dr. Harold Shipman from England. You see the handwriting on the right-hand side, the felon's claw. They think he murdered 1,000 patients. Ever heard of Charles Albright? I'm going to leave it to you to guess why they called him the eyeball killer. But if you look at his handwriting, the felon's claw was all over the place.
I just stopped writing now.
Now this is John Wayne Gacy. This is the one who was standing next to Rosalind Carter. He murdered 33 young men and buried them under his house. And by the way, he was so normal that he actually donated his time to be a clown for the children's hospitals. And you know, how normal can you can you be? And there's his handwriting again. There he is again with Roswell. Heard of John Wilkes Booth? Lincoln assassin. Now there's something else that I discovered in the handwriting, something we call resentment, where you have this very sharp stroke beginning a letter. And if you look at the handwriting of Ted Bundy, who they think killed 100 people, look at his handwriting and you'll see how often that forward stroke appears. He was very resentful. And why was he resentful? He discovered late in life that his mother, that he was illegitimate, and he suspected that his mother, he was the result of his grandfather and his mother together. So he was very upset about that. Charles Manson, who just died recently, thank God. Same thing again. You may not have heard of this one. 44 people are killed. Capital K again. Look at all the capitals there. Now, I'm not suggesting that if you do a capital T, that makes you a serial killer. It's just that it occurs time and time again in these serial killers. Gary Ridgway, 71. See the capital K is there? Anybody old enough to remember Richard Hauptmann? Yeah, he murdered the Lindbergh baby. You see the felon's claw there in the ransom note? And then he was so stupid that he actually signed one of the letters he sent to Lindbergh, he signed it BH. His nickname was Bruno. So how silly can you be? Anyway, he was put to death for that. Anybody heard of Patsy Ramsey? The detectives were absolutely sure that Patsy Ramsey was involved in it. So they asked her to copy the ransom note. And this is the two of them side by side. And you'll see that, and I've got it enlarged in the next screen, they were almost identical. But they never ever, she died sadly before all this came to light. So to this day we're not sure who killed the child.
Was that John Bonet's mother?
Yeah. Anybody heard of Dennis Rader? BTK stands for bind, torture, kill. He killed 10 people. See all the capitals all over the place. And he also erased, the people who erase a lot of stuff are often guilty of something, not guaranteed. See the capitals again?
They are all mentally disturbed.
Now, let me tell you how they caught Dennis Rader. He used to write to the newspapers because he wanted to be famous. And he got lazy one day and he called up he wrote a letter to the police. He said, if I put stuff on a CD, will you be able to trace it? So of course they said no. So he sent a CD and they caught him. He was working in a church. Now, there's been a lot of speculation about the Unabomber, Ted Kaczynski, and the Zodiac Killer. This has never been proven, but it's just interesting to see how similar their handwritings were. Have you ever seen anybody write upwards? That's optimism. What do you think it means if they write downwards? Pessimism. And there's a capital K as well. Who do you think that is?
Oh, Jason.
Yeah. Then I showed you this before, the analytical, the sharp writing, fast thinking, it size up people in the situation instantly. That's his handwriting again. Ever wondered what stress does to your handwriting? I'm sure many of you remember Richard Nixon. Look what happened to his handwriting in 1974 after the Watergate resignation. Deteriorated. It's almost a straight line. I don't think any, Norman, do you remember Napoleon?
My next door neighbour.
See, when he was sent to Elba, that's what happened to his handwriting. Now, have you ever seen anybody write very, very small? This has nothing to do with serial killers. It needs people who are able to do certain things and exclude all outside interest. And by the way, his handwriting also showed somebody who was very visionary. If you look at the T, the one in yellow, the T is crossed way above the top of the T. That's a visionary. See at the bottom as well. Ever wondered who's vain? That's John Kerry before and after Botox. See his handwriting? Very tall, thin, slender.
The Botox changed your way of writing.
Now, that's why he had the Botox. These are all ego-driven people. This is the interesting one. Anybody who does a big Y at the bottom, like you see there? They often say it's something to do with sexual imagination. Did you see it there? Look who signed it.
He's left-handed.
Now, anybody who does a long stroke across the top of a T, that's what they call enthusiasm. And it's interesting to see that when you see General Patton and Douglas MacArthur. They were very enthusiastic about their roles in World War II. If somebody writes to the right, now most people write just slight of the vertical, but if they write to the right, that's something to do being moody and impulsive and emotionally stimulated and constantly in need of affection. So going the wrong way. That's Marilyn Monroe's handwriting. Now somebody writes absolutely vertically. They're logical and practical in nature, and they ooze self-control. Lyndon Johnson. There's Jackie Kennedy, slightly backwards, emotionally with
Question. I have a question.
Jim,
What?
Easter.
If somebody writes slanted towards the left,
To the left.
to the left,
Your left. Emotionally withdrawn.
could be left-handed people write that way?
Not many, no. It was very difficult to find samples, in fact. In fact, if you ask anybody to lend you $10 and they write to the right-hand side, she writes very much to the right, she'll lend you $10. You won't. She said, I have to think about it. Now, handwriting is used in jury selection. I don't know if you know that, but can you imagine if you were defending, say, the Menendez brothers? You would want somebody who's sympathetic, empathetic, somebody who cares about people in trouble and what have you. So you would choose somebody like Marilyn Monroe, because she would be sympathetic towards the children. On the other hand, if you wanted to prosecute O.J. Simpson would get Lyndon Johnson. And of course, they didn't have that. And now I'm going to ask if there are any questions. I have a lot more, but I think I don't want to bore you too much. There's a younger man there.
Okay, you talk about this claw or the upslope or the little uppercase in the middle of the sentence, and that happens in a number of people who were murderers, right?
Right.
Now, it happens in people that are not murderers as well.
Correct.
But have you got a number, a physical number of how much happens in murderers as opposed to non-murderers?
The only thing that we see as significant is that felon's claw. Okay, the capital is seen in a lot of different people. No, the point is this, that there's not enough information. And in fact, that's one of the reasons that graphology is frowned on, because there's not enough classical information. Norman?
Jerry, all these things you're showing us are done in English. Are there any information on handwriting in other languages?
And the what, sorry?
Handwriting in other languages than English?
No, I've never done that. As I said before, I'm not a handwriting expert. All I've done is look at murderers, the handwriting of murderers, and that's why I limited to 34. You can't always find handwriting samples. Yes, ma'am. Yeah.
Do you know Alice, I think her first name is
Ellen
Alice
Weiser.
Weiser.
Yes,
Yeah, she's a handwriting expert.
right. She's more of an expert than I am.
To, many times to help select jurists,
Right.
yes. She does that, I think, for a living.
I think so.
Yeah, she's been called many times
Right.
for jury selection.
The point is this, that a lot of people are using handwriting as a pre-employment test, but not solely as a pre-employment test. There are lots of other tests, but that's just an additional test to help them in their selection process.
In what percentage is the prediction accurate, whether it's a serial killer or predict people's personality?
It's not accurate.
Half the time accurate or less than?
No. I think if it was that easy, they would be testing everybody's handwriting. I did it to be honest, I did this as a hobby and to write a book. Okay?
But in general, from other people's experience?
If you go on the internet, there are a lot of people who make a lot of claims, and they're not all valid. It's not scientifically valid.
Almost all of these people were white men.
Yes.
Does the same hold true when you look at criminal females, or has anyone looked at criminal females?
There are. In fact, I have some more. I mean, Eileen Wuesnos, you remember she killed 6 men in Florida? She was executed. But there have been several black people who have been serial killers.
A woman's handwriting would show the same.
Same thing, same traits, right.
Would a handwriting expert be connected with the police department? What department would they be connected with?
I think the police would take anybody to help them a little bit.
I understand, but if it's a handwriting expert, you have to go through different procedures, different colleges, or you have to learn something.
You have to learn something. Yeah, there are numerous courses. The French actually have been doing this for years, and they really believe in it. It's never been accepted here, just like they don't accept the polygraph.
I have 2 questions. First is, Houston has had 3 of the most prolific serial killers in Coral, Eugene Watts, and Dean Coro, and I'm sorry I'm forgetting the third one, but each of them, it'll come back to me, each of them has killed at least 20 to 40 people, maybe 80 people in Watts' case. Do you have handwriting in any of the people who operated in Houston?
No, I often look for the handwriting sample, and it's very difficult to get the handwriting sample of anybody. It was easy with Charles Manson because he wrote to so many people and he got so many letters from women all over the world.
My other question is that while you've shown us similarities, the claw you've talked about and that extension, have you done samples of writing in general to show, do people who are just normal perhaps also have that claw or that extension without killing people?
Yeah, I think the prevalence of, that's the felon's clause, the one that appears most often in the handwriting of people who have a problem. And I should mention that most of the serial killers had horrific upbringing. It's nothing they inherited from their parents. What they did was that in every case, every one of these 34 killers, they had a terrible upbringing. They were the result of a divorce, they were abandoned, or they were adopted, or they were abused sexually and physically, and they had just terrible upbringing. And the other things that they found are very similar. You know, the school shootings now, the individuals involved show very similar traits to the serial killers. What they find is kids who commit arson, kids who kill animals, kids who's petty theft, things like that. Very similar in both cases, school shootings and serial killers.
Do you have a sample of Donald Trump's handwriting as he signs those executive orders? And if so, would you analyze it for us?
It's that signature I showed you. He's very proud of that signature. Very up and down.
Yes. And would you analyze it a little for us?
Yeah, he very direct, very smart, aggressive, and that's very much what yeah. The question is, can you authenticate a signature? And there are a lot of people who do that professionally, and that's accepted by the courts because you can very easily identify certain traits. And I don't know whether I actually have anything. There's schools all over the world. Yeah.
I understand.
Just want to show you. If you look at presidents here, they all show a lot of determination, that long downward stroke. Thank you very much.
So much, Dr. Blumenthal, for a very, very interesting. Don't you all agree that this was really